Right, it is time for a Friday Reads video. Hey everyone, it is Shannon and I'm super excited to be here today and to share with you my Friday Reads. In my Friday Reads, I share the books that I finished, the books I started, and anything interesting about books I'm carrying over week to week. And I think I have a little bit of everything. Do I have a carryover? Well, we'll see when we get there. First up, the books that I finished. So I finished This Savage Song by Victoria Schwab. This is a buddy read from Izzy, with Izzy, Punk Rock Girl PA, and also Megan from Rogers Reads, also buddy read with us. I noticed on Twitter that Megan was in the middle of reading it, so we all ended up reading it together, which was awesome. The live show for this was earlier this week. I will link it up above if you would like to check it out. And yeah, and we're going to continue with reading our Dark Duet in October, and the live show is a bit earlier than normal. I'll leave the date down below if you would like to join us. This was very different than I expected, or at least different than I expected, and I enjoyed it more than I expected, which makes me think I didn't expect that much, which I don't think is true. It's all very confusing. So this is actually, I thought this was going to be urban fantasy, but I would actually put it a little bit more post-apocalyptic or dystopic, because they're not dystopic, post-apocalyptic, because there's an event, and then after the event there are changes, and so I just don't know how to talk about this one without spoiling it, so I don't really know too much what to say. I will say that it mostly centers on a city that is sort of divided into two different spaces, and it follows one person from each of the spaces, and those two areas have sort of come to a truce, but it's still very tense. The series is called The Monsters of Verity, and there are monsters, and there are different kinds of monsters, and I think it has an interesting take on like what is or isn't a monster, kind of. There's a bit of that. Again, it was a bit surprising. I thought it would go one way, and then there were some like ideas and imagery and descriptions that it felt like it was going to go in another way, and I'm like, oh, are we talking about this, or is this a message about that? And it never quite went in the way I thought it would, which is a good thing, especially because I was worried it was going to take a particular, I was worried that it was going to be like a moral of the story kind of situation, like allegory, but it didn't go that far. I really enjoyed the characters. I thought it had some really interesting things to say. I really could see the environments and the locations. Like, I really thought the description was really good. This is the first book that I finished by Victoria Schwab. I did start A Darker Shade of Magic, but never ended up finishing it because it was a buddy read, and I had to talk to my buddy. One day I will do that. But that's a whole other story. But so this is my first finish, and I enjoyed it. So I'm curious to see what will happen in our Dark Duet. Yeah, so which I will be reading in October. So that's the first one. Also, this is like the week of surprises in terms of expectations and stuff, because I also read Prime Meridian by Silvia. Let's get a good, there we go, Moreno-Garcia. This is a novella. I thought it was going to be a science fiction novella. It is not science fiction. This is speculative fiction. It's set in near future, and it is about someone who wants to go to Mars, but I would still say that this is speculative fiction, and not knowing that definitely impacted my reading experience, because although I enjoyed it, I kept on wanting it to be science fiction, so that was a bit of a like internal struggle, which kind of sucked, but that was based on expectations, and when I read the description, I'm like, oh, the description is a good description, but I was going on the cover because I had read previous work by Silvia Moreno-Garcia, and all I knew was that I wanted to read more, so I didn't read it, the description. Anyway, so this is set in sort of near future, and it's about, follows a woman who does a whole bunch of sort of side hustles with the goal of eventually wanting to go to Mars. She has a very, like, all of her relationships are very trying, whether they're family relationships or friend relationships or even work relationships. They're all just a bit on edge, a bit uncomfortable, a bit unbalanced in terms of power, and I found that really hard to be with for the entire time. Plus, there's also a strong disparity in the economics between the poor and the rich. Like, and she's poor, and and always worried, or she's always worried about money and food and wanting to go to Mars. And so that was also hard to be with. Now, it is a novella, so it's not that long. So it wasn't like, so it was worth it. And I did end up enjoying the story and the characters and what it was saying. And so, but it just had a couple of things against it in terms of my expectations. So, note to self, don't do that. Or not. I like, for me, I'd rather not know, especially with a novella. You know, sometimes the description can give you so much that there's not as much to discover. And so that's always the risk. That's a risk I am willing to take. And sometimes it pays off and sometimes it doesn't. So this time it didn't, but I still ended up enjoying it. When I think back on it to different moments, look, even again, locations were very vivid, but it was also that sense of, like, you know, the things that people were willing to do for money, how everything was a bit shady, pretty much, it felt like, and then there was, like, some people didn't even think twice about it, but a lot of people were really, really hustling, like, all of the time. So it was a challenging read, but it was worth it. And then we have another surprise, which is something I knew almost nothing about, and that was Adventure Time. So this is an all-ages graphic novel, and I read the first volume, which I think is the bind-up of the first 4 comics, and it is adventures. It is adventure. We have Finn, who's human, and then this is his friend, who I can't remember his friend's name, and Princess Bubblegum, and a vampire who likes to... Is it an axe? I thought it was a guitar. Maybe it's both. Maybe it's both, a guitar axe. Who wouldn't want one of those? And there's also Princess Desert, who looks like a dessert. It was so joyful and adventure-spirited and positive, and also a lot of times there was like in the images, you'd have like the main action going on, but then like in the background you'd have like little moments with some of the characters that weren't like in the scene proper, but there was still something going on with them in the background. It was delightful, absolutely delightful. And this was a bit of a random pick. I was just looking at titles from A to Z. I picked something else for my A to Z graphic novel challenge, but this one I had already borrowed, so I decided to read it as well. I think I heard about it originally. I think Osric Chow from Supernatural mentioned it. Like, I think he cosplayed one of the characters, and he told a story about that. It might have it might have been in the not this one, but the other Supernatural collection of stories. So that might have been how it got on my radar. It was definitely him. He plays Kevin Tran on Supernatural. So anyway, that's how it got on my radar, and then it was available on Hoopla, and I borrowed it because I was like, I want to, and then I loved it, so that was really, really wonderful. And then what else? Okay, so that's what I finished. What I started, I shouldn't have started anything because it's the end of the month, but I picked up 2 things that weren't even on my TBR. So I started reading The Progress of Love by Alice Munro. This is a collection of short stories. Alice Munro is a Canadian author. I'm sure many Canadians, like myself, read Lives of Girls and Women in high school. I love that book. It was amazing. So far I've read the first short story, just the first one, and it was also amazing. This is also a Governor General winner for literary awards for fiction in English, and I think I am going to do a very massive project or long-term project of reading the Governor General winners, but the winners for literary awards for fiction for English, because right now they have 7 awards, both in English and in French. So they have fiction, non-fiction, drama, poetry, translated work, and then 2 for kids literature, 1 text-based and 1 with words and 1 illustrated. So they have a lot of awards, and then they have them all in French, so each year there's 14 awards. Anyway, so I actually happen to have this one, so I am reading this one. So eventually I'm hoping to read all of the winners. It will take forever. Like, it would be my most ambitious project, even though it's not as many titles as those books, but those books I don't plan on, the goal isn't to finish. This would be to finish. So we'll see. And that actually, it might be impossible to do because I'm sure some of the works would be impossible to find because the awards started in the 30s. So Anyway, but I have this one, so I'm going to start with this one. So I am really enjoying it. It is fantastic. She's just an extraordinary writer, just really extraordinary. I also started Clean Sweep by Ilona Andrews. This is a reread. This is the first in the Innkeeper Chronicles. I've read the first 2 books before, and I kept on avoiding jumping into the third, and I think it's because I wanted to reread them. And I'm glad that I did, because there's definitely stuff that happens in this world, or like the backstory to this world, that I would not have remembered, and I'm sure will be relevant. This is, I would say this really is somewhere in between urban fantasy and science fiction. It follows Dina, who is an innkeeper, and she is an innkeeper to paranormal, supernatural, science fiction-y guests, and there is a symbiotic relationship between the inn and the guests. So the more guests that it has and the more happy the guests are, the stronger the inn is. And the inn is sort of its own entity, although I think it's symbiotic, though. I think it wouldn't survive without guests, so it has to be symbiotic. So yeah, so anyway, I love this series. I absolutely love the series. I really enjoy Ilona Andrews' work. Kate Daniels is one of my favorite series of all time, and so I'm happy to be back in this world. I think I'm about halfway through. This one's actually pretty short, and I got a 3-for-1 in the first bind-up, actually, of the first 3 books. Earlier this year, the authors did a sale. It's a husband and wife team, and they did a sale, and I was like, yeah, why? Like, I had already read the first 2, but I'm like, I happily have them, so I decided to reread that. So hopefully I'm going to finish that soon, because I have another urban fantasy on the radar, I don't know if this is urban fantasy or paranormal or horror, but one of my big October reads is going to be My Soul to Keep by Tenerive Dew, and this is a vampire series. It's a big book and series, and it's the first in a series, and the book is 500 pages. I tend to read books that are more like 200 pages, like between 100 and 300 pages. So this one I want to get to soon, and I don't like reading more than one book from a genre at a time, so I need to finish up Clean Sweep so I can start My Soul to Keep, and then also I want to start a whole bunch of stuff from my October TBR, and I'm going to start with the stuff that's going to expire from the library. So I am going to start with The Chupacabra Ate the Candelabra. This is by Mark Taylor Nobleman, illustrated by Anna Aranda, and I'm reading it for the Halloween Creature Feature Reading Extravaganza, and this is going to be for a book about a cryptid, because it has a chupacabra. And then I'm also going to read Heartstopper by Alice Oselman. This is not for the Halloween Creature Feature, this is just reading, and actually I put this on hold in June, and the hold finally came through. This is a male or boy a romance, or at least leanings. It's like I think a guy falls for his friend, and so I don't know where it goes, and I don't know, I know that they're also rugby players, or at least one of them is a rugby player. Anyway, I've heard only good things about this, and I really want to read it. My hold finally came in, so I'm definitely going to be reading Heartstopper. And then what else am I going to read? My other big, like, hefty title for the month is Tess of the Dubervilles by Thomas Hardy. This is a light Victober read. Not light Victober. I'm lightly participating in Victober just by trying to read this. And so we'll see how I do. I think it's best to start soon, although I think actually reading these 2 things at the same time is a bad idea, because Canadian fiction is something that takes me a long time to read, but these are short stories, so maybe I can pair off like a short story and then a few chapters and go back and forth. We shall see. I'm not sure. And then also, I need to read Shadow Point Deputy by Julie Ann Lindsay. This is for the Who Picked This Book book club that is hosted by Nicole and Jen, and the live show is going to be on Nicole's channel. They do live shows on Wednesday nights for their book club, and this is the one that we are going to be reading. They actually had Julianne Lindsay as a guest on the live show this week. I'll put a link to that up above if you want to check it out. It was really awesome to see her and hear her answers to questions, and it was just so much fun. And they did read, we read the Katie Couture series throughout the September, so the finale of the month was actually getting to there was a live show with the author. So cool. So yeah, and that's actually a Harlequin intrigue. And then last, I am going to read, and this just came in like right at the end of the month, and that is The Halloween Tree by Ray Bradbury. So this wasn't on my October TBR because my hold came in after I filmed it, and I think it's pretty short. I think it's like 100 pages. I've only heard good things about it, so I want to read it, enjoy it, return it to the library so someone else can enjoy it in October as well. So those are my reading plans, what I've read, what I'm trying to read. It's a lot. It is a new month. I can't wait to do my TBR in my reading journal and look and laugh at all of the ridiculous amount of books I think I'm going to be able to read this month, in addition to getting 13 read off my currently reading. And of course I'll randomly pick up other stuff. Optimism is how we start the month, and then we get to other stuff later in the month. So anyway, that's what I'm reading this week. Let me know, what are you reading this week? Are you starting in on some October reads, or do you need to play catch up like me with some of the things that I'm in the middle of, or do both? Actually, that's really what I'm doing, is doing both. All the things, all the books. That is how it goes. So there is my Friday reads. I hope you have a wonderful weekend ahead and enjoy October. Yay!